Coaches being fired for bad performances is almost a universal rule in sport. Something like the winner is always right. If your team isn't performing up to standard, it's simple. Pack your bags and leave. In the English professional soccer leagues, just this season, 35 coaches have already been fired and the competition isn't even done. One team in that league, Watford, not only fired their initial coach, but has by now also fired the replacement for that initial coach. In Canada, Toronto Maple Leafs coach Mike Babcock was fired after a bad spell of only 2 wins in 16 games. And this phenomenon can be seen throughout professional sports. In the Dutch Premier Soccer League, a coach resigned after losing 5 games, saying, "If you lose 5 games, it is time to go." I find this a really interesting phenomenon, and in today's video I want to take a bit of a closer look at why coaches get fired. Now, you might be asking yourself, doesn't this all make sense? Professional sports is about winning games and championships, and if the coach isn't doing that anymore, why shouldn't he leave? And this is true. However, we're not talking about coaches who are doing a bad job or coaches who have a bad reputation here. We're talking about successful coaches that after a short period of bad performances suddenly have to leave. The first interesting thing about these coaches being fired is that none of the parties involved seem to be very happy with the situation. Let's take a look at an example. Mauricio Pochettino, the former coach and manager of Tottenham Hotspur, a London-based team in the English Premier League. In his 5 year with this club, he achieved some extremely remarkable performances, with a highlight Champions League final place, the best club competition in the world, only last season. 6 months later, he was fired. It cannot be understated how important Mauricio has been for this club, proven by an overall 160 wins in under 30 games as a coach for Tottenham, an almost 55% win rate. Now listen at some of the things that were said after he was fired, and see if you can figure out what's strange about them. Mauricio and his coaching staff will always be part of our history. I have the utmost admiration for the manner in which he dealt with the difficult times away from a home ground whilst we were building the new stadium, and for the warmth and positivity he brought to us. I should like to thank him and his coaching staff for all they have contributed. They will also always be welcome here. Mike's commitment and tireless work ethic has put our organization in a better place, and we are extremely grateful and appreciative of the foundation he has helped us build here. Doesn't it seem weird to say these kinds of things about a manager you just fired for poor performance? On top of that, Tottenham was already critiqued for having an aging squad, and experts believe that their success last season was more incidental than a sign of long-term progression. And their performance after Pochettino left wasn't that great. Lastly, you have to remember how expensive it is to fire a coach. You need to pay off the contract of the previous coach, and you need to hire a new coach that probably has some kind of signing fee. On top of that, you don't want a coach that has less allure or experience than the one you just fired, because that would just look very bad for your club. Remember the Toronto Maple Leaf coach Mike Babcock? Supposedly, it cost the team around $4.5 million to get rid of him mid-season. So, why fire the coach? Well, the first and foremost thing that is mentioned is poor performances, and we need to change that. But does changing a coach actually make your performances better? Like I mentioned before, under their former coach Pochettino, Tottenham had a winning record of 55%. And what happened when they hired a new coach? Jose Mourinho, a world-renowned coach known as the champion maker. His status says, if you get me, I will win prizes. So what do you think? The winning record go 55, 60, or maybe even 70%? No, it's lower. It went down to 45%, a drop of 10%. After a brief period of good results, the team is now performing very poorly. Oh, and did I mention that the 55% win ratio was the highest a manager had ever had at Tottenham Hotspur? Research is also looking at the effects of firing a coach mid-season on the performance of a team. Studies were done in 2003 at the University of Groningen, and in 2012 at the Krannert School of Management and the University of Colorado, and in 2014 at Tilburg University in the Netherlands. All these studies looked at what happened to the performance of a team when they fired their coach compared to teams that didn't. And what did all of these studies find? Bad teams were still bad, mediocre teams were still mediocre. The performances and win ratios of these teams did not change due to getting a new manager. In some cases, performance briefly went up, like I mentioned before in the example of Jose Mourinho at Tottenham. But overall, none of the teams did better, and some even did worse. The studies are clear in their recommendations. Firing a coach mid-season is not going to be a valuable strategy in order to increase performances. So let's recap where we are right now with firing the coach. Nobody seems to like it. It's extremely expensive for some teams, and it does not increase performance. Which raises a question. Why are we still doing this? The first reason this still happens has to do with the way that we create and look at expectations based on managers. In essence, what it means is that when people look at the performance of a manager, they compare the current results with recent historic results. So those are the results for about a year to 3 years ago. In other words, a lot of coaches become the victim of their own success. Let's take an example of an imaginary team. This imaginary team has a goal of winning 50% of their games. New coach comes in, and in season 1 and 2, he or she is able to reach that 50% win ratio. Season 3 comes along, and season 3 is great. The team ups the amount of games they win to a magical 60%. A great increase for the coach. Everyone is telling the coach, you did such a great job with the reasons and the measures you had. Now season 4 comes along. It's not as good of a season as season 3 was, but it's not bad. Win ratio is 50%. However, now everyone is unsatisfied with 50% because recent historic results were 60%. Management isn't happy with the coach because he hasn't replicated what they had last year, and the coach is fired. But when you look at it, the coach was still reaching the goals and the expectations that came with the means that the club had. He became victim of his own success. And this is exactly what happened to Pochettino. Before he came along, Tottenham was a mid-table team with mid-table results, achieved with mid-table finances. He came on and he changed the team and the culture, made them play better, and reached levels that made them fight for titles and championships. Now, this season, the results weren't as high as his recent historic performances, but they weren't worse than what it was when he started. But because people created these expectations based on the last few years, they were unsatisfied and decided that Pochettino had to go. A second reason that is often mentioned when a coach is let go in the middle of a season is that the team needs a new impulse, a spark, something to get people on their toes again. This idea can be explained through the group stage development model. This model states that each group goes through 5 stages. forming, storming, norming, performing, and adjourning. In essence, the model states that a group starts as a collection of individuals, and that through different processes and behavior, roles and norms are created. When all the roles and rules are clear, the team can perform optimally. However, when a group is together for too long, it starts to slowly fall apart. This is the adjourning stage. So let's say a team is in this adjourning stage. Together too long and performance is slowly deteriorating. However, the situation demands that they still have to perform. Well, what can somebody do in that kind of situation? Well, one of the things that managers and people try to do is they try to push these groups back into one of the earlier stages. You can do this by changing up roles, rules, regulations, the way the team works, where they practice. Something like an emergency training camp. Take everyone out of their comfort zone. Stuff like that. And this is exactly what teams try to do when they hire a new coach mid-season. Bring in a new coach who's going to change up rules and roles, and therefore the team will get out of this adjourning stage and move into a different stage. Now this might seem great, and we can kind of see the results of this in things like the Tottenham team, where for the first few matches after a new coach comes in, everyone is indeed sharper and more on their toes, and results are there in the first few games. However, changing a coach mid-season is not enough to really change the makeup of that group. The teammates are still the same, training facilities are still the same, living environment is still the same, everything is still the same, except for the coach. This small impulse will maybe change a little bit about the group, but like I said, it's not enough to really change the group. Changing a coach mid-season might seem like a fast and easy fix to a team that is not performing properly. However, when we really look at what's happening and how teams perform after that, we can see that it's actually not a very effective measure. Many teams could use the money that they spend on changing a new coach to change other things. Like I said, go on a training camp, change the training environment, change the living environment. There's a lot of things that you can change in order to create a new impulse for a group that is in an adjourning stage. I'm certain that there are situations in which changing a coach is an effective measure, especially when the relationship between the coach and the players isn't good anymore, or the philosophy of the coach just doesn't work. However, if you're just doing it to create a new impulse to your team, you're wasting a lot of money that could be spent a lot better. Thank you for watching this episode of JWK Explains. If you enjoyed watching this, there's a link to all the other videos in the description below. If you want to see more of these videos and you would like me to make more of them, please like and comment so I can see what people enjoy. Thank you for watching, and see you in the next video.